The maintenance bay of Outpost Kepler-7 was never truly silent. Machinery hummed, air recyclers whispered, and somewhere in the depths pipes groaned with the weight of keeping 3,000 souls alive on this frozen moon. Evan had grown accustomed to these sounds during his 2 years as the station's night janitor. What he wasn't accustomed to were the pitiful squeals echoing from behind the waste compactor. He found them wedged between discarded plasma coils and radiation shielding, 2 dragon hatchlings. No larger than terriers, their iridescent scales dulled by grime and injury. One had a torn wing membrane. The other bore a deep gash across its flank that leaked luminescent blue blood. They hissed weakly as Evan approached, their amber eyes reflecting both terror and desperate hope. "Easy now," Evan murmured, slowly removing his jacket. The creatures were Dracani, he realized with a jolt. He'd seen their kind from afar during diplomatic missions. Magnificent beings whose empire spanned 12 star systems. But these were babies, probably stowaways from the last supply ship separated from their clutch. Despite their frightened snaps, Evan wrapped them gently in his jacket. Their body heat was fading, their breathing shallow. He couldn't take them to the medical bay. Station protocol classified unregistered aliens as potential threats, requiring immediate quarantine and military intervention. He'd seen what happened to potential threats. They ended up in laboratories, so Evan took them to the only place he could, his cramped quarters in the lower decks, barely 10 square meters of personal space carved from the station's bowels. He fashioned a nest from thermal blankets, used his emergency med kit to clean their wounds, and spent his entire week's credits on a special amino matrix from the black market that Dracani physiology could process. For 6 days, Evan tended to them. He learned their chirps and trills, the way they curled together for warmth, how their scales brightened as they healed. He named them Sky and Ember, though he knew he'd never be able to keep them. The torn wing membrane was mending. The gash had sealed. They were growing stronger, more playful, sometimes accidentally setting his only spare uniform on fire with excited puffs of flame. On the 7th day, during his shift, the station's alarm system screamed to life. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut. Over the intercom, Commander Pradesh's voice crackled with barely controlled panic. "All personnel to emergency stations. We haven't..." Unscheduled arrival. Dragon warship. Dreadnought class. Evan's blood turned to ice. He abandoned his cleaning cart and ran. The docking bay had been cleared, military personnel forming a nervous perimeter around the massive airlock. Through the reinforced windows, Evan could see it. A vessel that made their entire outpost look like a child's toy, its hull adorned with what appeared to be living metal that shifted and breathed. The ship bore the crimson and gold insignia of the Dragon King's personal fleet. When the airlock cycled open, the temperature in the bay seemed to drop and rise simultaneously. The being that emerged stood nearly 3 meters tall, his humanoid form clothed in armor that appeared to be grown rather than forged. His face was regal and terrible, with golden eyes that held the weight of centuries and scales that shimmered like molten bronze. A crown of horns framed his features, and an aura of barely restrained power radiated from him like heat from a star. Tharok, the Dragon King himself, had come to Outpost Kepler-7. "I seek the human called Evan," his voice resonated, not through the air, but seemingly through the bones of every person present. "The one who carries the scent of my children." The crowd parted instinctively. Evan found himself stepping forward, his janitor's uniform stained and wrinkled, his hands trembling. He had expected death, perhaps imprisonment for harboring alien stowaways. He had not expected this. Tharok's golden eyes fixed upon him, and Evan felt as though his very soul was being read. Then, impossibly, the Dragon King lowered himself to one knee, bringing his fearsome visage level with Evan's own. "You saved Sky and Ember," Tharok said, his voice softer now, though no less powerful. "My youngest clutch." They were curious hatchlings who snuck aboard a cargo vessel, seeking adventure. When I discovered them missing, I feared the worst. I have spent 7 days searching 12 systems following the faintest traces of their essence. "They're in my quarters," Evan managed, his voice barely a whisper. "They're safe. I didn't know how to..." "You did exactly what you should have done," Tharok interrupted. "In a station where protocol would have demanded their capture, you chose compassion. You spent your resources, your time, your care on beings not of your kind. You asked for nothing in return." The Dragon King stood, And with a gesture, 2 smaller dragons entered the bay, Sky and Ember, fully healed, their scales brilliant, chirping excitedly as they bounded toward Evan before returning dutifully to their father's side. Humanity is young in the galactic community, Tharok continued, his voice now carrying to everyone in the bay. Many species view you with suspicion, as reckless expansionists, as destructive opportunists. But I have learned something valuable today. I have learned that even the humblest among you possesses a quality rarer than any treasure in the void: the capacity to show mercy to the helpless, regardless of the cost. He placed a clawed hand on Evan's shoulder, and Evan felt warmth spread through him. Not just physical warmth, but something deeper, more profound. The Dracani Empire recognizes a life debt, Tharok declared. From this day forward, Evan of Earth, you are named Dracarthion, friend of dragons. You and your descendants unto the 7th generation are under the protection of my house. Should you ever have need, call upon us and we shall answer. A crystalline pendant materialized in Tharok's palm, glowing with inner fire. He placed it around Evan's neck, and the janitor felt the weight of not just jewelry, but of honor, of connection, of bridges built between worlds. As the Dragon King departed with his reunited family, Sky and Ember chirping their goodbyes, Evan stood in the docking bay surrounded by stunned onlookers. Commander Pradesh approached, her expression somewhere between shock and admiration. Well, she said finally, I suppose we'll need to update your personnel file. Dracarthion. Evan looked down at the pendant, then at his stained uniform, and allowed himself a small smile. He was still a janitor. He still had 12 more hours on his shift. But he had done something that mattered. Something that reminded the galaxy that humanity, for all its flaws, knew the meaning of kindness. And sometimes, kindness was the most powerful force in the universe.